aside from that, okay, so I need you to know that the meeting is being recorded. And a quick disclaimer just for all of you that have been in these classes before, because many of your names I've seen, and I'm grateful to you for being here today. We record these for the purposes of checking them out later on, more information to people out there. It's part of the website too. So spread the word. This is really truly for your own enrichment. I am a facilitator. I am not a lawyer. I am not in the healthcare arena. I am a consultant, and I've been in safety for as long as I can remember. And in 2011, I opened my own firm, and I went out there and also got my authorizations federally and also in California. And I'm able to teach both the 10-hour and the 30-hour OSHA classes. So through UCLA, UCI, and the Southern California NIOSH Education and Research Center, we're able to bring you these classes to your workplace. So call us, let us know, send Lindsay an email and ask her for a class in English or Spanish, either a 10-hour, a 30-hour, any of the classes in the curriculum that you see in their website. I'm more than happy to go out there, also provide services through audits. Audits are so key. Internal inspections. That's what I've been focused on this past year, since the restrictions started going down and we were able to go out there to the work sites. That's the first thing I focused on, because in the topic of machinery and equipment, we forget many of the little things that are part of the regulation, and that we, with the years and with time, we get just so comfortable in the space we're in, where everybody's doing their job, production is going well, and then things happen. So machinery and equipment are a big part of what we do in general industry and construction. And so today I want to bring you some bits and pieces of what I have learned along the way about lockout tagout and what it means in real life. For those of you that have been through classes with OSHA or me, through the OSHA Training Institute, or if you've taken any lockout tagout classes, you realize that it's a pretty specific regulation. They ask you to do certain things, and they do mention very specifically what they need employers to do. So my learning objectives today circle around the issue of why lockout tagout is so important. Why is it a regulation that continues to be one of the most cited standards in general in construction industries? It's also in the top 10 most cited, and it's also one that continues to cause fatalities throughout our nation. We want to revise some real life examples of serious injuries suffered by workers due to the lockout tagout and the lack of specific procedures. And I find that specific lockout tagout procedures is one of the most violated portions of the standard. For those of you that are new to safety and that have come to this series with us, which is this a monthly webinar, and you're like, okay, what is she talking about? They just assigned me to safety and I have no idea what this is all about. Anytime you have machinery and equipment and you have the need to provide maintenance, servicing, repairing, unjamming the machines, setting them up, anything that has to do with any of the issues that I just mentioned, you are exposed to the moving parts of the machine, or you're exposed to the stored energy that the machinery and equipment sometimes is stored inside the machine, even if you disconnect the machine, like in fuses, the case of fuses, or gravitational energy, hydraulic energy, and of course, the most common one is electrical. But when we do not effectively isolate energy, all of the sources of energy that machinery and equipment have, we are in danger of being injured, because the machinery could restart all of a sudden, or there could be some stored energy. If we think of gravitational energy, something that comes down and injures the worker that is still working inside the machine, or a equipment that is being unjammed, and just by the fact of unjamming the piece of equipment, some of that energy, still the inertia or the stored energy in the piece of equipment, may take that finger, may take that arm that is still in the operational area, or the point of a nip point or a point of contact where the person can suffer severe injury. So it is an emphasis program federally, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. Lately also, I have been working with employers, companies that have had issues of injury because of lack of specific procedures regarding lockout tagout. So this is a topic close to my heart. I want to make sure it doesn't happen to you. That's basically it. I want to make sure it doesn't happen to you. And it's important to learn from real life examples, learn from the lessons, somebody else's mistakes, but it's also important to learn from our own mistakes. And so I also want to make sure that I give you some tools to reassess your training program for lockout tagout, and so that you can provide to your employees effective training. Many times we already have our training going on and we don't revisit it to see how effective it's been till we have an injury. And that's already too late. So let's reassess them today. After today, I want to give you a list of to-dos, and I want to highlight some of the issues that in real life have brought stress, blood, sweat, and tears to those of you that have been through injuries because of this issue. So yes, the main issue is preventing people from getting hurt, but it's also helping you guys with the job you do. You're doing a very noble job, which is protecting people at their work sites. And lockout tagout is part of those regulations that continue to be an issue, that we continue to see injury. So like I mentioned, federally, we have an emphasis program that is going on. An emphasis program is put together by federal government anytime they see an increase in any specific type of injury. In the case of lockout tagout, they call it the Hazardous Machinery National Emphasis Program on Amputations in Manufacturing Industries. That is not to say that it's only going to be focused on manufacturing, but in any place of employment where there is the risk of amputations because of any type of machinery or equipment that is also used in the manufacturing industry. The lockout tagout and the emphasis program on hazardous machinery does not only focus or places a focus on the lockout tagout standard. There are a list of standards, and when I say standard, it means regulations that are also married to the issue of hazardous machinery and equipment at the workplace. And many of you already know that I'm talking about issues such as the use of power tools, the use of hand tools and power tools, the use of guarding. Guarding goes right along with lockout tagout, because we must be able to prevent any moving part to come in contact with a human worker, so that we prevent injury. So guarding does that. And there's different kinds of guarding. Is not just the physical barrier, but it could be also the distance between the allowed worker to be in that area. It could also be through curtains, lasers. There's a lot of technology that is used nowadays for guarding. So if I take you to that, and let me just make sure that we open that up. Give me a quick second, and I'll make sure I take you there. I want to make sure that you have a little bit of an idea of what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go to my Safari. Where is it? Okay, so the NEPS, or the National Emphasis Program, there's, I think, a list of 13. By the way, respirable crystalline silica is also in the list, and next month we have a class. So for those of you with the issue of crystalline silica in the construction or general industry, please take the class. You can check with Lindsay as to the dates, but I know it's coming up in December. Here it is, the National Emphasis Program on Amputations and in Manufacturing Industries. It's in a PDF format. And just so you know, although this is a federal document, there is a portion of this document that mentions how each of the states has to incorporate this instruction. So in California, we do have a program we do have our own emphasis programs, and those are given priority because obviously our state has certain issues that take priority, such as heat, right? So during the hot summer months, my tongue starts getting twisted. During the hot summer months, you see that citations, inspections by Cal OSHA to the sites or outdoor places of employment, because there is an emphasis program on heat illness. Second to that are other inspections, and they do have a priority list. And in that priority list, you will find the national emphasis programs listed on this page. So if they see that you do have hazardous machinery and equipment, and depending on the scope or the reason why they may open this to the scope of their inspection when they get to you. Remember that there is also a priority of why OSHA will get to your workplace. And the first thing is imminent danger. That means whenever somebody is in danger of going to the hospital, being inpatient hospitalized, having permanent disfigurement, dying, or suffering an amputation. So amputation, the word amputation is related in the regulation because of the description of what serious injury or illness in OSHA, in Cal OSHA definitions. So amputation is a huge deal for both our state and federal programs. And when you open this document, it becomes really, really helpful, because although the actual standards listed under this document, you can look up the equivalent. It's so easy now to Google things and just to compare and go about. Cal OSHA has been continuously strengthening their website. And so the Cal OSHA website has become a great tool that will help us today with what we're trying to accomplish. So the document is awesome. The link is in my PowerPoint. And here it is. So it says the purpose of the actual national program that says this document is describing policies and procedures for the continued implementation of OSHA's National Emphasis Program to identify, reduce, or eliminate workplace hazards associated with amputations in the manufacturing industries. And once again, in the list of Cal OSHA's priority, imminent danger, amputation, the word amputation is there. So we want to take a look at this and take a look at what are the regulations that apply. We have subpart J, general environmental controls, the control of hazardous energy, lockout, tagout. So we have our own regulation, and I will take you to that in a moment because it's right here. And we have an e-tool in the California OSHA website, which we know it's kind of just a tab, right? Because we have labor law and workers' compensation, self-insurance. It's a website that has that it is for the Department of Industrial Relations, and a portion of that, or one tab, is for Cal OSHA, which is right here. And for lockout tagout, we have an e-tool. All right, so I'm going to take you to the real world, etc. But I do want to highlight some of the issues, real life situations here. Where was I here? That's the actual regulation in federal OSHA. Here is the document that I'm talking about. What did I do with the document? See, I got lost there. So did I click on something and then I went? Yeah, I did click on something. Anyways, so there is a list of some of those regulations which have to do with hand and power tools, the use of machinery guarding, machine guarding, and the lockout tagout, the actual isolation of hazardous energy for machinery and equipment. So that is the federal link that I want you to look at, and the reason why this is such an important topic right now. And also for you to know that it will take till December 2024 for that emphasis program to go away. Okay, so don't forget that it'll take till December 2024 for that emphasis program to go away, or for them to make a decision whether or not they want to extend it. Here are some letters of interpretation. Letters of interpretation provide employers, all of you, with guidance on how to do things better, or questions that you may have, such as when does this apply? For example, I have some machines and some equipment that either are getting older, or I just have to do routine oiling of the belt, or I have to do a routine pressing of a switch because the part, depending on the many parts that we process in that machine, the operator has to go there and reset the switch and keep that electrical panel open. Things of that nature that become a day-to-day issue, whether or not lockout tagout applies. And so let's not forget the regulation is clear, and it says there are some exceptions to the full specific procedure of lockout tagout, or locking out and tagging out a machine, but it has to be within that context that we make that exemption. And then the requirement to protect employees is still there. So that's why I gave you this link. It's basically saying, the actual requirements, and then it's specific for milling machines, drill, press, tool changes, etc. For those of you then that on your floor, on your manufacturing plant, you have milling machines, lathes, drill presses, etc. Please take a look at this document. These are letters of interpretation, which means an employer, a company wrote to OSHA and asked the question. Another one is about OSHA that does not test, approve, certify, or endorse any equipment, product, or procedure, including machine design and risk assessment techniques. Many times, if you find sites or safety companies that sell you anything that is OSHA approved, run in the opposite direction. They could be manufactured or sold to you according to OSHA standards or ANSI standards, but they are not OSHA approved or OSHA certified, because OSHA does not approve or certify anything because of the risk of being sued, of course, right? And because it's just not something that exists that way. Standards applicable to automatic transfer device to processing and moving product. That's another letter of interpretation that is very, very good for you guys that need to read in that regard. Automatic transfer devices, unexpected energization in minor servicing operations, which is, I'm going to focus a little bit there because a lot of you have this issue going on, and then machine guarding for drilling operations. So you can click on that and get a lot of questions from employers to the actual OSHA themselves. Let's get to real world scenarios. If you have any questions, by the way, make sure that you ask them in the chat. You can chat with me and say, hey, I don't understand this, or what are you talking about? And or you can also unmute yourself. Remember that the session is being recorded, but in any case, it makes for a more interactive, more real life type of session. So ask questions if you have them. Here we go. It says, trapped janitor dies inside an industrial dryer. A 33-year-old Spanish-speaking janitor died after he was trapped inside a linen dryer at a laundry while cleaning plastic debris from the inside of the dryer drum. And here we go where we think common sense. A lot of the times when I go out there and I talk to employees and I say, so what do you think this happened? They go, well, it's lack of common sense. He said that the cleaning task, so imagine this ginormous industrial dryers. So he has to clean inside that dryer. And so he's going to prop the door open, the door of the dryer. He does it with a piece of wood. So common sense tells him that's enough for him, because when you prop the door open, it activates a light indicating the dryer is out of service. And that would be enough to tell everyone else, hey, don't turn this machine on, right? So that's when his common sense kicks in, and he always does the opening of the door and props it open with a piece of wood. But on the night of the incident, this janitor propped the door open and entered the dryer drum. So imagine it's big enough to fit his body without the de-energizing or locking out the dryer, which means the dryer was still connected to what? The actual electrical source, electrical power. He began to clean the inside of the drum. Although the light had been activated, a co-worker, unaware of the janitor's cleaning activities, and this is so common. This is exactly what happened at one of the situations that I'm going to talk about later on, another example. The workers around the area where cleaning, repairing, servicing, unjamming is taking place many times have nothing to do with that machine. They usually don't operate it. That's not their job. They don't really know what's going on. But for some reason, because they're good employees, they feel the machine should be working. And if it's just a button that needs to be pressed, like this is the case, he's like, oh, although the light had been activated, a co-worker unaware of the janitor's cleaning activities did not notice the light and restarted the system. So you can ask, when you do incident investigation, you do ask why, and you do your appropriate root cause analysis, and you can find out, for example, you can imagine a lot of things right now because we don't have all of the information on our table, but you can already imagine that this worker worked in that same area, but was not aware of a lockout tagout specific procedure for the dryer.
Tom, I have to call you back.
Patrick has, Patrick, you have your sound on. If you wouldn't mind muting it, that would be great. In any case, if you do have a question, please do ask it. So this guy doesn't know about what's going on because you can already think that there was that lack of awareness of what lockout tagout procedures are for servicing, repairing, or unjamming machines, and in this case, cleaning the machine. And he just started the cycle. 200 pounds of wet laundry entered the dryer, knocking out the wooden door prop, trapping the victim inside and starting the drying cycle automatically. I can't think of a more horrific way of dying. The victim remained trapped inside until the drying cycle was completed. He died 30 minutes later of severe burns and blunt head trauma. Can you imagine the suffering? And this is real life, guys. There was no written energy control program for custodial personnel responsible for cleaning equipment. Affected employees must be trained on sources of hazardous energy and must have an understanding of the importance of turning off and de-energizing equipment before starting work. So this is a known regulation. This is something that has been there since OSHA was conceived. Some of these had, of course, revisions and everything, but even our state program has had information on how to do lockout tagout for a very long time. In any case, even if there are no regulations that are specific to any hazard in your place of employment, you are required to look into hazard recognition for anything new that you bring in. And those of you bringing in new technology like robotic arms, please keep your eyes open and get as much information as you can from the manufacturer in order to prevent any injury occurring. You have to ask the questions, what could go wrong that could cause injury to my workers? If it's a robotic arm, is anybody going to go inside that cage? Because a lot of you say, well, but it is protected. There's a cage. The moment the cage is open and the worker comes in, the whole system shuts down. But the real truth is that piece of equipment, that robotic arm, is not de-energized, and glitches can occur and injury could occur. So make sure that you do everything you can to protect the workers. You don't want your story being plastered all over OSHA's website. There are some words here that start calling your attention, such as affected employees, authorized employee, which is super important. And we're going to touch on those in a moment. Another example, a worker loses part of a finger from clearing a jam. Coming out of a tumbler, pieces of broken concrete blocks of chips drop to a power conveyor belt, transporting them to a non-power roller blade. Then two operators push the blocks by hand along a non-powered roller table to a stacking machine where they are placed on pallets. A chip jammed the line between the powered conveyor belt and a roller table, stopping the conveyor while it was still energized. The employee attempted to remove the chip by hand instead of using an extension tool. Part of his finger was amputated while attempting to unjam the piece of machinery. So here's one of those examples where you have an operation or a production line where things are happening on a daily basis the same way over and over. And where workers do this, specifically this exact same example of reaching with their hands to unjam just to reach for that little chip. And because they've done it in the past without any incident, it's easy to do it and do it again and again by not just him, but his coworkers, because everybody just does whatever else is doing. You kind of lead by example. If you have more experience on the job and you kind of get the tricks of the trade, you are doing it that way. And it's just a matter of time for somebody to get injured, like in this case. So what happened here, which is different from the previous example, is that the employer did have a written hazardous energy control procedure, but was generic. And I want to stop right here and say that is a huge problem, because that's exactly what I find on a day-to-day basis when I go out there and visit manufacturing plants, construction sites. People have generic written programs that say, and I'm going to show you one in a moment, but it's kind of like, this is the purpose of lockout tagout. We have machinery and equipment. We do service it and maintain it. And for that purpose, we do lockout tagout. We de-energize the equipment. And you just list steps that you find off of OSHA or off of some template you were able to download, or that a consultant like me or like someone else sent you. And you did not take the time to specify the steps to actually either clean or unjam or do something like this. So for this particular example where this worker lost a part of his finger, what I would have had in place is an actual, well, tools, of course, but you would actually have to have work instructions for the workers working the line. And in those work instructions, part of that specific procedure is how to remove chips, right, with tools, and also an extra layer of protection where you do not allow workers to get to the moving parts so that they don't lose the finger. So there's mesh, there's guards that you can look into to implement and to put in place, because remember, anytime you are looking at fixing a hazard, anytime you're recognizing a hazard and you want to abate it or remove it, you look first at the hierarchy of controls. Elimination, substitution, right? Elimination, engineering controls, substitution, administrative controls. And then last but not least is PPE. So it goes from most effective to least effective, and you have to do this analysis. So although they had this energy control procedure, a lockout tagout program in place, it was generic. It didn't specify which machines needed it. And Cal OSHA requires that each piece of equipment has its own specific lockout tagout with step by step. And you can understand why it's so important, because it's not the same to unjam a conveyor belt with still energized. It's not the same. You're not going to have the same procedure, step-by-step procedure that you would have for a belt and pulley elevator type of machine that has the guarding put in place, where you would actually have to remove the guard, de-energize the piece of equipment, and do all of these steps one by one to clear a jam. So very different machine and equipment, very different physical way of doing things, very different step-by-step process. That's why having a generic hazardous energy control that you just buy from some software program or download it from a free site is not going to cut it. And also the tools on this website are going to help you greatly, but they're not going to completely fulfill the actual requirement that it is to protect the workers that do the actual unjamming, servicing, cleaning, repairing, or adjusting of your pieces of equipment. Okay, so it was generic and did not enforce compliance of energy control procedures. What does that mean? It means everybody did it however they were used to doing it, right? And whenever they did not go right along with the lockout tagout procedures that the company had, no one got disciplined. No one got to be counseled. No one said anything, basically. The injured employee stated, and by the way, when you do have somebody skipping steps and you do apply disciplinary policy on them, or you have HR talking to you about how to do this process, you have to document it. If you don't document it, it never happened. And OSHA wants to know, what have you done to really correct this issue? And it also helps if you want to use the Independent Employee Act as your defense in case something goes wrong. And that would be your only defense, right? It's a serious injury illness. Someone got a finger or an arm amputated. If you have a record that when this happened in the past, you've disciplined workers, that you go back and review, you go back and retrain, that will be an effective defense on your part. Otherwise, you're going to have to just go through the regular appeal process, see what you can do, but still pay all those penalties. And you have a person in the hospital without an arm. It's just a lose-lose situation. The injured employee stated that he was never trained to use extension tools to unjam equipment. Of course, they're going to say that, because sometimes although someone took the time to say, hey, you go ahead and take this tool and you reach for it, but then the rest of the workers are not doing it. Of course, he's going to forget that someone told him. And no one really told me. I mean, they told me there were extension tools, but nobody uses them. So that's ineffective training. Also, he was told by supervisor that he could not turn off or stop the machine or process because the blocks needed to just keep moving. Employees were not trained in the procedure to shut down machinery before unjamming chips and special work practices, using extension tools to unjam machinery while the line was still energized. So you can do that, but nevertheless, you have to still guarantee the protection of the worker who is doing this using extension tool, because then you have the issue of, is this extension tool going to bring also the worker too close to the moving part? And is it effectively protecting the worker or not? Also, the block tumbler conveyor line had a prime mover stopping device located over 20 feet away from the operator, which he could not reach in the event of an emergency. So all of these things, you can tell already, they are contributing factors. There are some root causes to why this happens, but it's important to discuss these real life examples, right? California data from inspections addressing lockout tagout, which is Title 8 of California Code of Regulations 3314 say, 2005 and 2006, of those 4 fatalities and 53 amputations from 149 inspections and 224 citations, the total penalties well over $1 million, and the average cost per citation was $4,698. 2006, of 5 fatalities and 60 amputations and 237 citations, the total penalties were almost $1 million. The average cost per citation almost $4,000. In any case, remember that this is just the direct cost, right? Because you do have all those indirect costs, such as, the time that it takes for a company to have a team doing the incident investigation, retraining somebody, all the loss of morale and everybody talking about the injury and feeling awful and kind of blaming each other, or just blaming oneself, which happens a lot when someone gets a finger or an arm amputated, and then that you could have done something different as a supervisor or as a coworker, and all of that is time that is lost, and it doesn't count in your direct costs. But aside from all of these, you may think is not that big of a deal, is not that much for a company that averages, I don't know, how many millions a year in sales. But the truth is, the nightmare really starts whenever any of these documents and citations, penalties, and violations gathered by OSHA become evidence that can be accepted in court whenever there's a third party liability lawsuit, etc. It's really a nightmare. If we don't look at these numbers that may be small for some companies, and for other smaller companies are big numbers, it's still the nightmare of having to deal with the issue that someone got hurt on your watch. All right, so I want to go more over this e-tool because it really does have great information. So it goes through really emphasizing how in real world these things continue to happen, that you should learn from them. It gets into the definitions and the reason why definitions are super, super important. It's because of that example where the people working around a piece of equipment or machinery that is being fixed may be tempted to restart the piece of equipment or machinery, or he or she may need it. So maybe he or she works with this piece of equipment, and under the regulation, that person is called an affected employee. If I work with this piece of equipment, then I need to know if it jams or it needs service or it needs maintenance. Can I do it? Because my coworker does it on his machine. He has a similar machine to mine, or he operates a machine like mine, and he does it. So can I do it? So an affected employee becomes an authorized employee when they have the actual training to apply the lockout tagout procedure, and they actually know the machine so that they can isolate all types of energy for that particular piece of equipment, and they can do the actual process of repairing, servicing, cleaning, etc. So employees at risk of injury, the authorized employees, the affected employees, and there's also other employees. Other employees are anyone else working in the surrounding areas that need to be aware of lockout tagout in taking place in that area of equipment. And you can see in these pictures very clearly how people can get hurt and injured by being smashed, being electrocuted, being caught between pieces of equipment, or moving parts, right? So the actual definitions are there, but you can already tell by what I explained to you, that depending on how you classify that worker, you will actually make a determination as to the level of training that they need to have. So more on some of these definitions that the actual regulation puts out there that you can read on your own, right? So this is important. There are other definitions that you also want to know, such as cord and plug connected equipment, because maybe you will be repairing a cord and plug kind of, let's say, a handheld power drill, right? And because it's a handheld tool and you want to open it up and repair it, and it's cord and plug, they sell nowadays a lot of good devices to do this. They're not here. There's some examples here as to pneumatic energy isolating devices, but you do have a lot of hardware that is sold by all of those, Granger, Uline, etc. Whoever you do get your equipment from, you can ask about plug and cord energy source isolation devices, and they will sell them to you because they have to be specific for the lockout tagout procedures. They have to be identified only for the lockout tagout procedures in your facilities. So definitions are important. Read them, analyze them so that you know what layer of training, how much training each of these employees need. When is it required? And then it goes into when is not required. It's always required during cleaning, servicing, adjusting operations. So you can already here see how, if the standard is required, how come it's not taking place? How come this guy is sticking his body into this dryer, into the drum of the dryer, just blocking it with a piece of wood when he's cleaning this machine, and he's not thoroughly following step by step the lockout tagout specific for this machine? Why? Because there is a lack of training. There is a lack of a very comprehensive lockout tagout program for that company. And that's really truly one of the root causes and issues here for that particular injury, that there was no comprehensive lockout tagout program in place, where out of that, it derived the actual layers of training for each of the affected, authorized, and other employees, where there was a lack of specific procedures for that dryer machine, specific to that dryer. Step number one, isolate energy. How many different types of energy? And you will see that there are some forms that allow you to actually do that analysis. How many types of energy is this machine using while in operation? How many types of energy do I need to isolate? Because many times the workers that I used to working with a machine don't write it down, how many types of, because they know the machine, and then the affected employee tries to unjam, tries to do one of these procedures and gets hurt. Okay, more on the slide that I prepared for you. So we talked about that. Now you know there is an actual e-tool, and there's a way of going through OSHA.gov website also, and I put the link there for you to look up your own company and all of the other serious injuries and fatalities that have occurred in the past. I think it goes back as far as 5 years for any establishment who has had a serious injury, illness, or a fatality. And OSHA.gov keeps records of your company if you had one of those serious injury, illness, or death in the last 5 years. So it'd be good for you to click on that link and go find out what's your OSHA history for your company. So more on that e-tool, the definitions, all of these, you have to visit each one of them. There's an actual video also that you can play. I'm not going to play it right now just because I need to convert it. But anyways, that's a good example of how to do unjamming on when you are doing regular, just regular operation or production. And there's a transcript to it. There's a WorkSafe BC slideshow, which is really, really helpful. So some resources for you in that OSHA tool. And then let me talk to you a little bit about this specific example of a lockout tagout issue that occurred at one company not too long ago, actually 2 months ago. So as you can imagine, here's the pit in red, circled in red. So the worker goes inside the pit, removes the guard, and starts unjamming this belt and pulley elevator system here. And for this particular machine, you can tell that the arm fits very easily through the opening, and he starts removing the material. In this case, it was metal pellets, and he's removing them with a shovel and by hand. And in the meantime, his co-worker is doing this work with him as well. They're both in the pit. But one of them, the injured worker, is actually a temp worker. And this temp worker, several things happens when we talk about temp workers. Temp workers are brand new to your company, and they are coming to you with a level of training that is very, very basic. So as a to-do for you today, write it down. Any temp workers, any workers provided to you by a staffing agency, they need to be under rigorous new worker orientation program. And you have to focus on hazard recognition and abatement with them. And if possible, put them under a mentorship program where you assign them to a supervisor or a buddy, a lead person, where they are expected to be mentored for a certain amount of days. No matter what they're doing, that mentor is there. In this case, this coworker is just doing the job with him, and break time came, and they stopped the work. But during that break, he's talking to his supervisor, and he says, well, the reason they were doing this is because the machine unjammed, and in the past they had done it successfully amongst themselves. But of course, this crew member, this temp worker, was not part of the crew that had done it successfully. But they had done it this way, where they just kind of shoveled out the material that had caused the jam, and the elevator just kind of restarted and production kept going. So because nothing happened in the past, the supervisor felt he could do it again, just as a regular part of unjamming the machine like they had done it before, and not wait for maintenance, who were the actual crew who was authorized to do lockout tagout on the machine and make sure everything was up to par. As a matter of fact, when uncovering root causes, part of the usual and recommended preventative maintenance had not taken place previously, and therefore the jam occurred as a result of the lack of preventative maintenance. So one thing leads to another, a lot of contributing factors, but nevertheless a couple of root causes there, where the worker says, the two co-workers that are unjamming the machine, are kind of like, oh yeah, we're going to get it working. This is going to be good. We're doing it. They come back from break, and supervisor is not aware that temp worker goes back to the pit to continue doing what he was doing prior to break. And he just finds the other worker that was with him, with the temp worker in the pit, and says, so these are the actual switches for this machine, right? And whenever you want to restart it, or whenever you've cleared the jam, you just restart the machine. Or once you've cleared the jam, you press the actual switch so that the belt moves. And if you've cleared enough of the jam, the elevator will actually restart and everything will be okay. So what did they do? They actually restarted it without making sure that the temp worker was out of the pit and away from the moving parts. So the worst part of this is his arm was still inside, because they had removed the guard. You see how guarding goes? Guarding is that barrier, that panel, anything that obstructs any body part from going into the moving parts, right? In this case, they removed that guard, physically removed the guard, so they were able to actually access the belt and pulley system and unjam it. Once they reset that switch, and because they've cleared enough of the jam, which is actually what they wanted to do, that's how they had done it before. They removed some of the jam, and then by activating the switch, the machine kind of, unjammed the rest of the way, and then started going, and everything was fine. They put the guard back up till something like this occurred, where his arm was still there, and they couldn't see him because the machine is big enough, and the worker's arm got trapped, and a lot of the skin and tissues were shaved off of his arm. So not a good thing, right? Something that you wouldn't be, you would feel great remorse, great guilt. You could have done it differently. And when the incident investigation take place, there's like 5 different things that were listed. For that purpose, what went wrong? When you look at things like this, how can we improve these things? Well, it starts with your walkthroughs. It really starts with those internal audits. So before anything of this happens, look at your machines. Look at the guarding issues in your machines. Look at how many of these machines actually need repair, maintenance, servicing, cleaning up, unjamming during your day-to-day operations. Make a list for them and find out if you have specific procedures for each of them. So that it starts right there with those internal audits, finding out how many pieces of equipment you have right now on your floors that need the repair and the cleaning, the servicing, the maintenance, the unjamming. So for that, you read the regulation, you take a look at that e-tool and you go, oh, okay, so if I have any of these pieces of equipment and my employees are doing this, I'm going to have written procedures so that nothing goes wrong. And although they have done it like this in the past and they know what they're doing, in theory, we want to have it in writing so that things like this don't happen again. And open your eyes up and say, ooh, we do get temp workers and they do work with these machines and they may be called to help for this type of activity. And if that is the case, they do not get inside that pit unless they've been thoroughly trained as what? An authorized employee. Because in this case, he was one of those employees that wasn't even affected because he didn't even operate this machine. He was in the vicinity and then he gets called to help out, shovel out material to clear the jam, and tragedy occurs, right? So one thing leads to another. Many times you do have a strong safety program and it doesn't include your temp workers. And that's where you have a very, very weak point in your safety system. That's where the black swan type of event may occur. So take a look at that today, find out how many of these pieces of equipment and machinery your own workers are unjamming, your own workers are cleaning, servicing, maintaining, etc. And also take a look at those machines and pieces of equipment that you do not have your own employees clean, maintain, repair, fix on jam. And what you do is, if you're outsourcing it, you make sure that those people that come to your facility and are doing the lockout tagout for your machines, that they come and show you their lockout tagout specific procedures. So that's part of working with other employers on your site. OSHA has a multi-employer worksite policy and procedure manual, and you can also reference that. But that's what says, no matter who you're working with, if people involved in a work site where there's more than 2 employers, there should be an agreement as to how they work together, right? And so whoever is outsourcing, whoever is hiring, whoever is doing the contracts, you need to take a look at, okay, so how do you do safety? And let me tell you, how do I do safety? And this is my program. And let me see your lockout tagout programs in order to see that they do have a specific lockout tagout procedure for that specific machine, and that they carry it out. So it doesn't hurt to do that audit as well while they are present. As a matter of fact, I highly encourage you to do it, because the last thing you want to see is for an injury to occur and OSHA to show up and issue a document request the moment they start their inspection, and they walk with you and they see what happened. They're going to ask you for a ton of documents. Look at all these check marks on this, right? They want all of your safety inspection records. Those are your audits. So they want to see if you actually took the time to analyze your floor, your place of employment, and see where are the hazards, and then your training records. So they want to see how many times a year and the topics that you've been training your workers on. And then they want to see, oh, was this a temp worker? I need to see the actual contract agreement between you and that staffing company. And they also want to see all the records for that incident, such as the incident investigation report, your incident investigation report. So if you haven't trained your people in incident investigation, it's going to come to light. That's some of the things that OSHA is going to say. Title 8 California Code of Regulations 3203, Injury and Illness Prevention Program, element number 5, you must have procedures for incident investigation, root cause analysis, and you didn't do it. That's another portion of the pie that OSHA will look into. And then your DWC-1 forms, when were they given, the 5020, the 5021, and then who was this employee employed by, who supervised it? So names, job titles, date of hire, your duty statement. So what kind of duties, what kind of job was this worker supposed to do? And why was he doing something else that he was not trained for? So after what we just explained today, I highly recommend, and then at the bottom, do you see here, they are asking for the lockout tagout program specific to that machine, specific to that machine. This is where they get that information where they say, oops, this company had generic procedures and they didn't have anything specific for this machine. And then also the training record for that specific worker, for that layer of for that level of training that he needed as an affected employee or as an authorized employee, which in this case, it should have been as authorized because he was clearing the jam. Affected and other employees do not perform lockout tagout. So remember that as of today, if you have employees that have nothing to do with repairing, clearing jams, fixing machinery and equipment, and they are doing it because they know their machine well enough to do it successfully, it's only a matter of time for them to get hurt or involve someone else or ask someone else's help because they think that they are A-OK authorized to fix a machine, and then for that buddy or that other person they're working with to be injured. Remember, OSHA has a specific regulation for this purpose, and affected and other employees do not get to perform lockout tagout. Those are the definitions. So affected employee, there they are, but you can visit the actual website. When is lockout tagout not required? And there are some good examples in the actual e-tool that I've talked about extensively today. So here it says, if the machinery or equipment must be capable of movement during cleaning, servicing, and adjusting operation in order to perform a specific task, the employer shall minimize the hazard by providing or requiring the use of extension tools, such as extended swabs, brushes, scrapers, or other methods. So that you see how when you're scratching your head and saying, well, to clear a jam, I'm going to have so-and-so, instead of using their hands, use a reaching tool. That is allowed. Nevertheless, there is a requirement to still protect the worker effectively. So I like this picture here because by putting that mesh and using an extension tool to prevent injury, you're effectively providing protection for the worker and doing that, clearing a jam or preventing that jam while the machine still needs to move, or while the machine still has to do the the production, the line of work, the conveyor belt, whatever is happening, but it has to be effective in protecting the worker, right? Examples of alternative measure includes extension tools, specially designed tools. So you can design your own tool. You can also do remote devices, for example, lubricators. If there's a machine that you need to lubricate as it is running, you need to take a look into remote devices. So no employee is opening any part of the machine where there's moving parts. And I know there's a lot of older machinery and equipments. I had a question from a printing press type of employer, and the issue was my machines are 50 years old, and there is no way, people do get their fingers there when they're needing to kind of reset something because of the ink. And he was explaining all of it, and he was showing me pictures. And I said, unfortunately, if you're asking me to tell you that this is grandfathered in and that you don't need to look into providing effective protection because your machine is so old, that is not the case. OSHA does not go by the age of your machines. It's all about protecting the workers, and losing the tip of a finger is already an amputation. So look into that when you are making a decision as to what applies and doesn't apply. The second condition for an exemption to lockout tagout says minor tool changes and adjustments and other minor servicing activities like lubrication, like what we were talking about, which take place during normal production operations, are not covered by the requirements of 3314, which is lockout tagout, if they are routine, repetitive, and integral to the use of the equipment or machinery for production. But the work must be performed using alternative measures which provide effective protection. So it needs to be, so either condition 1 or condition 2, and the requirement for employee protection continues to be there, even if the full lockout tagout procedure does not take place, and it's not performed by the authorized employee. You can get out of that, but still the requirement for protecting that employee is there. And I love this picture, but because it gives you a mental, it just helps you understand, okay, so I can do it with tools, but I have to still protect the worker. His hand can't get to the moving parts. All right, so the last thing I wanted to touch on, let's see what else we have here. The training, right? Because we had those 3 learning objectives today. For your training, know what is required by the regulation. So when you read the regulation, you get to the subsection for training. There's always a specified list of training requirements. So when you do training for your facility for any given topic, don't think that it's just, oh, well, we should teach them how to, do the work and follow the step-by-step procedure. No, go back and read. I am required to train on A, B, C, D. We were doing heat illness this week, and you won't let me lie. We saw that just for employee training, it was A, B, C, D, all the way to letter I. You had to talk to your employees about each of those specifics in the regulation. And then for supervisor training, which is the next layer of training, because supervisors are always held to a higher standard. For supervisors, you had A, B, C, D, which were 4 more letters, 4 more aspects of the regulation that you needed to discuss with them beyond letters A through A. So supervisors had to go through the entire regulation, A through I, and then B, A, B, C, D for them. So same thing, know what's required in the regulation, develop an effective program, perform the training, evaluate the effectiveness of your training through hands-on evaluation, take a look at how they're doing it, also ask questions, test them, and make changes, because many times you realize that your training was not effective because they didn't learn to follow the specific steps, or because they don't remember part of the lockout tagout procedure and how to effectively isolate the energy. So maybe it's the language, right? And you need to get somebody else that speaks the language to either translate or make sure that that person is also involved in the lockout tagout procedure and is able to provide training and reevaluate after you make changes. Again, go back to the step where you're evaluating the effectiveness of your training. There are so many tools out there that are effective on doing hands-on without having to expose yourself to the actual re-energizing or de-energizing of equipment. And I got you a link there, but there is so much out there in the website for safety, lockout, tagout, hands-on. And this is a training system that I thought was very, very, very nice. It allowed for your workers to, be not at the machine, but take a look at the switches, how to actually use the hardware, the clasps, the locks, how to use the tags, the different devices that you use for lockout, tagout. So they have a valve there, they have the breakers, they have the switches. And with that, you can actually hands-on and physically do the actual lockout tagout procedure. And when we talk about the procedures, the actual forms, I want you, by law, you're required to have your equipment lockout tagout procedures by the machine, right there next to your machine where everybody can see it and easily reference them. So it's something you cannot forget. This is one of the most skipped issues of the regulation. This one, and also the periodic inspections. There's a requirement for you to go every 2 years and review that this step-by-step lockout tagout procedure is being observed, that no one's skipping steps. So take a look at those, because the periodic inspections and having the written specific procedures for your machine in place with the machine are two of the most cited and most violated under the lockout tagout standard. And it leads to tragedy. It leads to injury. Why? Because if you think of all of the examples that we talked about today, if that worker, even that temp worker, would have seen their danger, lockout tagout applies before unjamming this machine, and he took that binder and, hey, no one has trained me on this. Maybe I need to have training. Hey, hello, supervisor, I need to have training. You see how this extra step, this extra requirement would give that extra layer of protection. Okay, so here are some of those written procedures that I was talking about, and they look like this. This is tool A. This allows for the energy source determination. It's a very good analysis. The guys that already do lockout tagout are the ones that have the expertise to do this. They'll go over, oh, this has a battery, this has capacitors, oh no, this is mechanical, or it has electrical, mechanical, and potential energy, a suspended load. So they write it down and they make sure that they put, okay, so for this one, to isolate, which means to completely shut that energy and not let it run through the machine, what am I going to go to? Am I going to go to the switch? Does it have a motor control? Is it a power panel, a circuit breaker? And then you do the numbers so they can easily identify. So it's a great document for the purpose of documenting the sources of energy for your pieces of equipment. And then after that, you would go into, let's see, the actual procedure. Hold on, let me see if you can see it now. No, you cannot see it. And I know someone's got questions. Just give me a second. I just want to show you this. This is a sample, right? And this is off of OSHA. OSHA doesn't have it anymore on their website, which I think they'd realized that everybody was using it as a general lockout tagout procedure. But after you do the actual recognition of the different sources of energy per each of your pieces of equipment, then you are going to list all of those machines, and you're going to have different specific procedures for each machine and equipment. So your sample general lockout tagout procedure is a general procedure that says the purpose, the responsibility, how you prepare for lockout, and the sequence. So they give you an example, and you can follow this example and this sequence when you're preparing your own specific procedures. But you cannot leave this one and say that this is your lockout tagout written procedures, because that's how you get in trouble. By the way, workers who do not have a say in the actual lockout tagout, those are the ones that get in trouble. So when you are putting, if today, after today's class, this is something you're going to do, make sure that you involve those workers that today currently now are doing the fixing, jamming, etc. So thank you so much. I know you guys learn. Oh yeah, you wanted the address. So thank you, Rocio, for giving everyone that website or the actual tools. It's just one. I don't, they don't I don't endorse that particular product. It's just an example of what you can have to actually do training, because hands-on in the case of lockout tagout it's crucial. Don't forget then not to have a general procedure that you just downloaded. Review them today as a to-do for all of you, and make sure that it's specific to each of your pieces of machinery and equipment. I am very grateful for your time. I wish you all a fantastic weekend. Thank you, Lindsay. Send me any questions that you may have. I'm open to questions. I'm here to help. And anytime you ask a question, even if it's the craziest question you've ever asked, we all grow. It's a win-win situation. Thank you again. So
Cool,
my information is always on the slides. Thank you, Lindsay.
Yes, thank you, Alba. Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to quickly remind everyone that we do have 2 Spanish webinars coming up. I think it's in about 2 weeks. Those are free on heat-related illness and a PPE. So if you have any coworkers or employees who could use that, please let them know.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, for the reminder. Once again, I appreciate your time, and I'll see you next month, first Friday of the month. Thank you, Lindsay.
Yes. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Take care, everyone.